Migration is one of the behaviors exhibited in the animal kingdom. This phenomenon, which is periodic, is portrayed by some land-dwelling animals, marine creatures, and birds of the air. Typically, these migrations are not for the weak, and they have their own costs and benefits. During this mission, animals must get ready to face their fears, and those that are not lucky never get to their final destination. The long distances traveled by migrating animals from one location to another are quite insane. But why would these animals choose to migrate? Why put themselves through this insurmountable stress? In biology, an animal considered successful must have the ability to adapt physiologically and behaviorally to the continuous changes that happen in its environment. During such times, animals display biological rhythms, which are responses that allow them to cope with the drastic changes in their environment. Among these responses is migration, which involves interactions among the environment, physiology, and biological rhythms. For instance, environmental signals might trigger a physiological response in an animal and tell it is time to migrate. This is evident in migratory birds, whereby the length of the day triggers their pineal gland to release hormones that make them restless and have the urge to fly for long hours. In general, migration helps animals relocate from regions that are less hospitable to areas that will support their survival and reproduction. Therefore, they can migrate due to seasonal climatic changes, in search of enough food resources or safe sites for breeding and egg-laying. And how do migrating animals find their way? There are two ways in which they can achieve this: directional orientation and navigation. Directional orientation is when the animals travel in a specific direction. For this to happen, they must travel in a straight line towards a specific destination, a task that requires a compass or a sense of direction. For most animals, the sun becomes a useful tool which they use to orient themselves. In addition to this, the animals must also be aware of time as the sun moves across the sky. On the other hand, navigation is more complex as the migrating animals require compass and map senses, which create an awareness of their location. Use of cues to change direction is common, and the animals must integrate information about time, distance, and direction. Some animals which migrate at night, such as birds, use the position and pattern of the stars to navigate, while others use their sense of smell, as seen in some sea turtles and salmonfish. Surprisingly, marine biologist Kenneth Lohman demonstrated that the navigation of sea turtles, mostly the hatchlings, depends on the direction of light and magnetic field. Migration behavior has been observed in various species of animals, such as birds, zebras, whales, butterflies, fish, sea turtles, and wildebeest. Let's have a look at some of the most fascinating and mysterious migrations displayed in the animal kingdom. Beginning with insects, the migration portrayed by monarch butterflies is quite astonishing. The migration of these particular butterflies happens annually, where millions of them travel from continental United States and Canada to Mexico. This journey is estimated to be around 2,520 kilometers, or 1,520 miles. Their migration is linked to the abundance of a special plant called milkweed, on which the females prefer to lay their eggs. Once their eggs hatch, the emerging larvae or caterpillars feed on the leaves of these plants. Generally, milkweed plants die during the cold seasons and grow again during warmer weather, such as spring. The migration of these butterflies can also be influenced by environmental factors such as temperature and humidity. They may opt for an area that supports their survival and has an abundant food supply, moist air, and non-freezing temperatures. Secondly, there is migration that occurs among various fish species. This scenario has been observed in skipjack tuna, European freshwater eels, Pacific salmon, and European freshwater eels. The dwelling place of the skipjack tuna is in the warm Pacific, and the population from the eastern part of the Pacific tends to migrate between spawning grounds of the central Pacific and the feeding areas near the coast. The migration cycle of skipjack tuna starts with the juvenile fish that takes several months to grow. They leave the spawning grounds and migrate to the east, where they feed until they become young adults. Then they migrate again to the spawning grounds in the west. The Pacific salmon are common in the North Pacific, where they live in the sea but migrate to freshwater to breed. Shockingly, Pacific salmon normally spawn once and then meet their death. The young salmon hatch, stay, and grow in the freshwater spawning grounds for about 2 years. Then they migrate to the ocean as juvenile salmon, where they intensely feed and rapidly grow. Reaching maturity, they ride the currents and migrate to the original breeding grounds where they spawn and die. It is postulated that salmon use geomagnetic clues, water quality, and smell or flavor to recognize their freshwater spawning grounds. For the sockeye salmon, this species normally migrates between the waters of Alaska and the central extreme of the North Pacific. On the other hand, the European eel dwells in freshwater, but migrates to the sea to breed, mostly in the deep waters of the Sargasso Sea. The hatched larvae eels, which are shaped like a leaf, migrate to the north and then east on the Gulf Stream. They eventually reach the western coasts of Europe, where they transform into young eels and enter the rivers. They move upstream to feeding grounds where they thrive for up to 10 years. Later, they return to the Sargasso Sea where they spawn and die. Thirdly is the migration that occurs among sea turtles. However, we won't say much about the migration of sea turtles, since I have already covered much of the information about them in my video named Science of Sea Turtles and Their Risk of Extinction. Please check it out for more details about these sea creatures. So briefly, the migration of sea turtles is common in females, where they travel to sandy beaches to lay their fertilized eggs. Once their egg-laying business is done, they return to the sea. After a certain period, the hatchlings emerge from the nesting sites and crawl towards the sea. Something unique about the migration of sea turtles is that they possess an internal geomagnetic compass that helps them navigate. This trait aids the hatchlings in crawling towards the sea, as they are attracted by the reflection of light from the moon and stars. Fourthly, there is the migration that occurs among various bird species. A perfect example of such a bird is the Arctic tern seabird, whose migratory habits are quite unmatched. As an adult, the Arctic tern can migrate over a distance of about 32,000 kilometers in a year by traveling from north to south and across the two hemispheres, and then back to its original spot. When migrating, birds can employ several navigation methods. For instance, the experienced navigators among the flock can volunteer to utilize their skills for the benefit of the entire flock. They also employ visual cues such as land topography, wave patterns, the position of the sun, or the stars. A sense of smell also plays a key role in navigation and locating food resources. Some bird species are gifted in detecting and orienting themselves to the magnetic field of the Earth. To support this, a study carried out by Stephen Emlin of Cornell University showed that birds have the genetic ability to learn constellation patterns and employ them in orienting themselves. He also showed that young indigo buntings normally use the North Star's position as their point of reference when navigating. Fifthly, there is migration that occurs among whales, especially the humpback and grey whales. These particular creatures make long migrations between cold water feeding areas and warm water breeding areas. Something astonishing about the humpback whale populations in the southern hemisphere is that they rarely exchange members, as they are genetically distinct populations. However, the same cannot be said about the humpback whales found in the northern hemisphere, as they intermix with other humpback populations. Therefore, the humpback whales of the southern hemisphere rarely meet those from the northern hemisphere. Interestingly, The Northern Hemisphere populations feed in subarctic waters during the northern summer and winter mate and calve in subtropical waters. Conversely, the Southern Hemisphere populations feed in the Southern Ocean waters during the austral summer and winter mate and calve in tropical and subtropical waters. Next is the notable animal migration that happens in the Serengeti. The Serengeti is a 30,000 square kilometer open plain in Africa that stretches across Kenya and Tanzania. This animal migration occurs each year, with nearly 2 million animals following a roughly clockwise path within this particular plain. The largest population percentage of these animals are the wildebeests, while the rest of the population comprises zebras and Thompson's gazelles. These animals walk more than 3,000 kilometers in search of green pasture. Ideally, the Serengeti plains are usually bare and dusty during the dry seasons, but once the rains fall, a green veil of vegetation covers the plain, which the animals can't wait to devour. But before they can achieve this, they have to overcome formidable obstacles along the way, climbing rocky gorges, enduring drought-stricken grasslands, and crossing crocodile-infested rivers. Interestingly, as these millions of animals move across the plain, their impact is so great that the ground literally trembles. Along this migration journey, hundreds of thousands of wildebeest are born and start walking within a few minutes after their birth. Within 2 to 3 days, they become fully adapted and match pace with the rest of the herd. Since this migration cycle starts in December or January, after the southern Serengeti has received rainfall, many animals die throughout the year due to exhaustion, predation, or inadequacy of food. Lastly, migration behavior is also displayed by spiny lobsters, which are common off the Bimini Islands in the Bahamas. Something unique about their migration is that they do not swim, but literally walk in a single file on the ocean floor. Their migration is triggered by the first storms that occur around March, which make them sense that their habitual shallow water homes are no longer safe. They gather themselves and form a single traveling file, with a leader at the front while the rest follow closely, ensuring that their head touches the tail of the lobster in front of them. The march then begins, and these creatures can walk non-stop on the ocean floor for up to 48 kilometers. Despite the uneven ocean floor and ocean currents, these creatures don't break their connection, and they continue walking in a straight line. In case they encounter a predator, they normally form a circle and project their menacing claws outward. After a long march, they finally reach their deep water destination. This particular destination favors them during winter as the water is a bit warmer than in the shallow water. These warmer temperatures allow their eggs to grow faster. During the early summer and spring, the spiny lobster returns to their coral reef home, but this time they do it at their own leisure and travel separately. Spiny lobsters are uniquely gifted among the invertebrates as they possess an inner sense that tells them exactly where on the planet they are. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you have enjoyed this episode on animal migration. Which animal migration behavior left you amazed? Let me know in the comment section. And in case you would like to see more fascinating topics on natural science, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.